Yeah, you have so much reach, and you have so much ability to help so many different people now. I mean, it's like, you've got God power. It's amazing.
Certainly not, but
It needs all the things. Give it all the things.
oh, perfect! You nailed it.
You can't bend physics, but you can do it right better software.
And you're doing MPLS changes or BDP changes. May God be with you, right?
I always feel like I'm just a little fish in a sea of big fish.
I've got a nested 6-node vSAN.
Oh, guys. People, quite often think that they don't have anything to bring to the table when they absolutely do.
Everybody should. Anybody in IT that skips the phone stuff, it just hasn't earned it.
Okay, I lied. I have one more question.
On demand.
Correct.
Welcome to Gigacast episode 21 for Sunday, September 9th. Live to tape from the Gigacast headquarters, I'm Britton Johnson.
And broadcasting live from my home lab, I'm Tony Reeves.
Tony, how are you?
I'm doing good. How you doing, brother?
Good. I'm trying out this new noise gate app on my microphone, so if I sound funny at any point during this recording, I blame that. So just an FYI.
I noticed you switched out your mic too.
Oh, I've been using the Go mic for the last couple episodes. I think it gives me just that little bit of bassy tone that people really like.
Oh yeah, Bear White.
But I had a moment at VMworld when I was talking to Pete Fletcher, and he's just like, "Yeah, you've got that really good radio voice." And I'm like, "Man, if Pete is complimenting my voice, that's just like right to the heart, brother. Thank you." So.
Yeah, he gave us both a lot of compliments one night. We were hanging out at the iCandy Lounge, and he gave us a lot of really nice compliments on the podcast. He's like, "Honestly, I'm a fan. I have to say I'm a fan. I really like your podcast."
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
So we did a quick little episode 20 after VMworld on your way home while you were still in the airport.
Yep, I was still en route.
And so I just wanted to plug a couple quick things before we get to this week. So if you haven't listened to the recap we did after VMworld, go out and grab that one quick. It's like a little 15-minute thing. But if you missed it, I was at VMworld. I did a whole bunch of on-camera interviews that are up on the VMware NSX YouTube channel. So go check those out. A lot of them were really fun. They were, mildly entertaining and informational, and I think people seem to like them so far. So,
and your official title on that was?
I was the NSX roving reporter.
Yep,
it was a good time. And then Tony, you have a blog recap on the blog for it, right?
Yeah, if you just go to digitalv, as in virtualspace.com, I've got a recap on some of the things that I did and people that I met, and some really cool photos recapping the event.
And then lastly, you are still searching for an SSD sponsor for the lab, right?
I am, yeah. I've had some initial talks out on the show floor with Micron, and we're still pursuing that. But if any other sponsors want to get in touch with me, let me know.
Yeah, so, and full disclosure, I mean, if Tony gets somebody to corporately sponsor his lab so that he can blog about it, we'll share his experiences here in the show as well. So we can, do some good coverage of products for people, just to help Tony and help Tony thereby helping the community. So, and would not, no money's exchanging hands, or nobody's getting paid for this. We're just trying to help out, so.
Yeah, and there's lots of people that are looking for SSDs for their home lab wanting to run vSAN, so.
Yes. So, let's not make them wait anymore. Today we have with us our good friend, our former Wisconsin VMUG leader, and current VMware expert employee, Mr. Aaron Bolthouse. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, good to have you.
So, where are you right now, Aaron?
I'm in Palo Alto, actually. Got here this afternoon, flew in. Boy, are my arms tired.
Wah, wah.
Yeah, I'm out here for a week and a half of training.
Whose joke is that? No, I mean, that's going to bug me.
Every bad comics joke.
If I feel like it's like a Bob Newhart or
Rodney Dangerfield.
Yeah, somebody. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway. I'm out here for a week and a half at VMware headquarters.
That sounds fun.
We'll see.
Have you been there before?
I was actually, before I became an employee, I was out here in December at the VMUG Leadership Summit.
Oh, right, right.
Yep.
What's really intriguing is, to me anyway, maybe not to anybody else, but one of the fellow SEs that's on my team, he and I actually met at that event when he was coming out for the Leadership Summit as well. And so he's here at this training with me this time.
Is this specific product training, or are you not allowed to share, or what can you tell us about what you're maybe doing?
This is called Start Live. It's their onboarding training. So I got hired onto VMware back in April, and this is the in-person onboarding training that we have to, like, every employee has to do. But then there's also, normally every employee, like, standardized just gets 5 days. But because I'm also a solutions engineer, I have extended training that goes into next week.
Cool. All right. Well, we'll get more into that as we kind of cover a few, minor topics and stuff. So, so Aaron, talk to us first for a couple minutes about your career journey, where you started, where you went, and how you kind of got, how you met Tony and I. Let's sort of, go in the Wayback Machine. If I had a sound effect of, the Wayne's World.
When this baby hits 88, you're going to see some serious
There you go. All right. So, yeah, I actually, went to college for computer information systems, got out of college. I
Wait. So you're one of the rare people who's actually using his degree for what he intended to do?
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It was a feat. Graduated college, went out and worked out in Boulder for IBM for a bit. That whole business unit ended up getting outsourced to India. Pretty typical story for the 2010 era. Ended up back in the Midwest, working for a manufacturer out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and started at the bottom there as a help desk analyst and worked my way up to systems administrator, and then actually infrastructure manager. Was at that company for 8 years, and in that time I also built up some other external relationships with the VMUG community. Started coming around to VMUGs and then participating, speaking at VMUGs, and then out of VMworld, I ended up running into Rod Gabriel, one of the co-leaders for the Wisconsin VMUG, and he kind of cornered me and he was like, "Hey, I'd love to have you on the steering committee. You seem like you've got a lot of energy, and you want to."
That's an understatement.
Talk about these things, yeah, right. So I ended up hopping on the steering committee, and then I took on so many different things there that they eventually made me a co-leader. And I was a co-leader there for 3 years, and then that's how I ended up meeting both of you guys through VMUG, and Tony, who your listeners might know, is actually a steering committee member of that same committee now.
Yep.
And Britton, I actually really got to know you, I think, when we did the NSX deployment at my previous employer. Yes. I wanted to bring network security, microsegmentation, and distributed firewalling into help out the security situation at my previous employer. And we didn't really have the budget to get a lot of PSO. And so it was something that, we had a mutual understanding of where we wanted to get to. And Britton really helped out with helping me get there. And we deployed NSX fully and microsegmentation and distributed firewall all within that environment. And then right about the time I got done with that project, I got a call.
And just as we're getting to the good stuff of like the real meat and bones of the project, Aaron's like, "Yeah, I got this thing to do.
I gotta tell you something."
So I'm like, "Come on, brother." I still have to follow back up with them to see where they're at with things, but I'm just too busy. But yeah, that was a lot of fun, especially for me, because like that was one of my first like on my own real NSX deployments with a client, and it was a lot of fun working with you. And I mean, literally, like I had these moments of like, if you've ever watched The Big Bang Theory, there's a time when Sheldon and Raj are working on a project together, and they're just like locked in a room, the two of them, and they're laying on the table and they're doing weird things. Like, I had a lot of thoughts of those moments when we were in the room. I don't know which one of us was Sheldon, but
I don't know, but it was a great experience, and it allowed me to really get my hands dirty with NSX, which ended up turning into a really good career move for me. So
and we broke some stuff and made him fix some stuff, and
we did
every
indeed.
good deployment.
I had to figure out virtual distributed switching, because we were all on standard switching at the time. I had to migrate that over, and figured out that you don't migrate your vCenter and your DNS server at the same time.
Just a small detail.
That was a nice fail. Luckily, taking down vCenter does not bring your production down. So
I was thankful for that.
And Aaron and I never worked on any projects together, but I'm sure you remember this. One of the early interactions we had after kind of getting to know each other at VMUG was I was going through a POC with VDI at the time, Horizon, and you had it fully deployed in production, and he was kind enough to invite me up to a Sturgeon Bay facility and give me a full walk around tour, show me the nuts and bolts of how it all worked, and that was pretty awesome. That was appreciated and was a good time. Yeah,
definitely. One of the things that I cut my teeth with when I first started at Hatco was they had a really legacy endpoint setup. They had a bunch of Dell GX270s from 2003 that were all blowing caps left and right, and I'd have to take them down to the shop and blow all the metal shavings out of them, which, if anybody knows, metal shavings and silicon really works well together. So I ended up leveraging that VDI in that project, and moving all of the things that were traditional endpoints on the factory floor to fanless zero clients, and the failures just stopped happening, if you can imagine that.
Yeah, it was pretty cool to see that deployment. I appreciate that. That was way back in 2015, if you can believe that.
Man, time flies.
Yeah, it does.
And I know that's like part of the goal of getting people to do VMUG presentations is kind of doing these like show and tell things of like what you're doing in your company. But it would almost be more interesting if we could do like video walkthroughs of how people actually do stuff and deploy things. Instead of going
try and get
through.
That past legal departments, though.
Well, I understand that. So we're small. We can do these kind of things.
Right.
Good idea, though.
I was in more of a just do it and ask for forgiveness mode. So.
Yeah, that was a fun day.
I mean, we're not. I'm not advocating giving away trade secrets, but jeez, not that stupid. No comments from the audience. Great. All right, thanks.
Well.
I didn't say anything.
Okay, so
I don't think
we love you, Britain.
I know. So so that's kind of where you were when we kind of came and fell in love with you, Aaron. Honestly,
Thanks.
And then I got to know I got to know your wife and your dog remotely very well through that project as well, because you worked at home a lot during that time. So,
yeah.
How's Kylo liking Chicago, by the way?
She barks all the time. She hates all the noise. Milwaukee was much more quiet.
Nice.
Oh well, poor dog.
Yeah, well.
So talk to us next about your journey to VMware. How the heck did you end up where you are now?
Yeah, so I actually was calling my AE because we were having some licensing issues with some global licensing problems. And it had been something that we were dealing with for about a month or so, trying to buy some vSAN over in China. And I had discovered that maybe the licensing that I had inherited from my previous systems admin at that company maybe had been procured inappropriately for where it was being used. And so we were working through the paperwork and the details on how to fix that debacle so that I could actually move forward and buy some vSAN licensing. And at the end of one of these conversations, I was actually in, funny story, I was in my HR manager's department, in her office. And I got this call, and I stepped outside of her office to take this call and talk to my AE about licensing. And at the end of the call, he stops and he's like, "Hey, we've got this position open. Would you be interested in maybe talking to somebody about it?" And so I had to go into the hallway next to the office so that I could have a little bit more of a conversation. And I told him I was intrigued, and I was pretty happy at my previous employer, and I didn't really have any reason or desire, or I wasn't actively looking or anything like that. So it was kind of one of those things that just kind of popped up, right? And I've always told myself that if I heard the universe talking to me, I would listen. And this ended up being one of those things where I kind of felt that was what was going on, right? And so I ended up on a phone call with my now boss that was supposed to be a 15-minute intro call that lasted 2.5 hours. Wow. And I'm sitting here, talking to the guy, and I just realized at about an hour in that this was interview 1, and I was on it. And the ball started rolling pretty fast at that point.
That's always a good sign. I've had interviews in the past with people, and one of my IT career moment interviews is I got dropped off by my wife, and she was gonna go kill an hour at the mall. She comes back an hour and a half later and is sitting in the car for another 45 minutes while I'm still wrapping up this first interview. And I'm like, well, I think it went well.
Yeah, I would think so. So I kind of got the gist that they really wanted to fill this position, but they didn't want to just stick anybody in it, because it had been a position that had been open for quite a while. And the guy that had been in there previously, this is a core SE for commercial North Central, and the guy had been in it previously, had jumped in, didn't like the gig, and bowed out. So he had kind of filled the role for about 6 months. They had a almost a year gap before, and then this was 4 months gap after that guy had left. So there had been a significant amount of time in the territory where there had been no SE in the field. They were relying on the inside, and that can be stressful for a lot of different people within the organization, mainly the AEs who are in the field without that type of technical support. But so the first interview went well. I got a second interview a couple days later. I got a third interview that next week, and then the next thing you know, I'm sitting in the office with my old boss, explaining to him that I had taken a position at VMware. And the ironic thing is, he had just gotten out of a 2.5-hour meeting about how to retain millennials.
Irony.
Which I technically am, just on the outer edge of. Not that I prescribed any of the
That's great
stereotypes, but yeah. So there was a requirement that I had to move to Chicago, so I kind of uprooted my wife and our puppy, and moved from Milwaukee, Wisconsin to Chicago, Illinois, and we did all that in a fairly short order. I did give my previous employer 3.5 weeks notice, which was pretty generous. But as you said, Britton, I had some things in flight that I had to tie up, including an NSX deployment.
Minor detail.
Hanging there.
But I felt like I was leaving it in pretty capable hands. I had a gentleman I was grooming to take over the VDI portion of the environment. He got a lot faster than I think he was anticipating, but I've continued to keep contact with him. That was just 6 short months ago now at this point. I think the math works out. And, he's actually doing really well with the role. So, I feel like while losing my expertise at the time may have seemed like a a problem for them, they've still got somebody that can take up the reins and do the work. So.
And it's these kind of things that happen in companies where, it's that good chance for the guy coming behind you to really prove himself. And I mean, that's, like this interview that I had that went crazy long. I mean, eventually the guy who hired me left, and I had that moment where I had to decide, like, either I'm going to take his job and do it well, or I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and they're going to hire somebody else. And, thankfully at that moment, I took the opportunity and was like, okay, let's do this. And, never look back.
And those are those types of situations I feel like, where I was talking about, you have to grab onto it and you have to do it. Right.
Yeah.
I didn't really see, I spent nights talking about it laboriously with my wife because she had actually just gotten a job. And
I remember that.
She is 3 months in on a pretty significant career job, and she had to give that up to for me to take this opportunity. So she's an angel.
Shout out to Summer Schmandy.
You got it. And so definitely very appreciative for my supportive wife. Couldn't have made the move without her.
Awesome.
Well, that just goes for all of us. None of us would be sitting where we are today without our better halves. So
you got it.
Okay, so that gets us to where you are today. Tony, do you have anything you want to jump in with?
Sure. So what would you say the first 6 months have been like? I mean, obviously we're probably talking about learning from a fire hose here, but just kind of give us a general overview of what starting with a big company has been like over the last 6 months, especially somebody that you've admired for so long.
Yeah. I mean, the first couple of weeks were just drowning in paperwork, electronic paperwork. They didn't actually mail me paper. They used, online.
As one would expect a modern technology company to do. Yeah.
I would hope
but it's still paperwork.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's still paperwork.
Still has to be done.
So, there was that. There's a lot of onboarding training. So as I mentioned before, I'm actually in Palo Alto right now to do onboarding training, but it's live onboarding training. There was a whole mess of modules that had to happen online prior to me coming over here. And that's not training for like VMware solutions. That's training for, corporate VMware, right? How to be an Epic 2 employee, how to
be nice to people,
how to live the culture,
and
it is truly, it's one of those things where people are like, oh, you have this culture and you've got your mission statement and all these things, and it's just fluff, right? But my experience has been that the people here truly live it, and that's been really refreshing because I've not met a single VMware employee colleague at this point that I could say doesn't live that culture, which is absolutely refreshing.
And coming from people on the outside, I think that's one of the big draws is people can see the culture and the values that VMware provides, the community that they foster in the vExperts and the vMug communities, and all the ways that people can get involved and help contribute to that. So it's, I think, one of the big things that a lot of us community members really value about VMware is their reach and their support of the community.
Absolutely. And so, the training pieces, they were a lot of time, but, I'd say probably the biggest thing that was the biggest shift for me was, I was a trenches IT guy before. Every day I'd come in and I would be working on something, or, if a fire happened, I'd be getting paged. And this role is not that. This is a lot more conceptual. You have to know the solutions. You have to understand what they are capable of, but your focus on that isn't like, how do I implement this in this specific way? It's more like, how does this company that I am now, trying to help, how do they take this solution and obtain their business objectives, right? Sure. So it's definitely like a whole flip on your head from the average IT role. But it's something that, I saw as an additional challenge, and I saw as something that was definitely worthwhile to give a shot. And it's been great.
So how hard of a transition from an engineer who's doing everything kind of perspective, how hard of a flip is it in your brain to, focus in on your one thing that you're talking to this customer about versus having to try to pull your head out of looking at the whole giant picture?
Yeah, I mean, you guys have known me for a while. You know that I love to talk. So that part of it came natural to me. The focus piece is a bit more where I've had to kind of do some self-training, where I end up in the weeds a lot of times. We can sit there and we can talk about feature, form, function. We can talk about how do you implement NSX and what are the different things it can do, or how can vRealize operations do XYZ for you, instead of spending all that time talking about the specific feature sets. Like I said, you have to talk more conceptually so that you can really help the businesses understand how these solutions can impact them. And talking about feature sets doesn't do that. So you really have to win the hearts and minds, as it were, with the ideas of what virtualization and the different pieces of the VMware vision can do for a customer. And like our good friend Cody DeArkland at VMware would say, it's about solving problems for people at the end of the day. It's not so much about selling them something all the time. It's really just a matter of you solve the problem and then you get the sale. Yeah, absolutely. And I would say I spend 50% of my time just working with customers to help solve their problems, rather than just trying to sell to them, right? So I'm obviously pre-sales, so that's a part of what I'm charged with, is to try to sell things, but I don't see it that way, and I don't think a lot of other solutions engineers at VMware see it that way. We're here to help these businesses be better at what they do and what they need to do to be better businesses. And that was one of the things that I really looked at when I was making this transition. Was at my previous job, my ability to impact was small. It was the size of the business that I was working for. Now, I've got all these different customers, and my reach, my impact is much wider at this point. I can help all of these different businesses become better at what they do. And that's just a really cool thing for me.
Yeah, and I think part of that transition, going from being the guy who's hands-on, he's driving everything, you're the engineer, you're implementing it, and you're switching over to solutions architecting. I think that it's cool. You're still in the technology, right? You don't get to drive anymore, but you're still in the technology. You still get all the cool widgets that you get from VMware for all the products. You get to see how things interact. So you see that from a solutions standpoint. And for those that don't know, Aaron is actually our SE for the company that I work for. And he's been great. We actually just finished working yesterday, or 2 days ago. Yeah, Friday. We just did the final sign off on some new vSAN rollouts. So it's been really good to work with you on a professional level as well, getting everything all signed off and ready to cut POs. So appreciate it.
Thanks. I'll Venmo you $20 later for that.
Well, and I gotta say, like, now that we're shilling for Aaron here, I even from a partner perspective, I mean, Aaron is working with me on some projects for some of my clients, and so I mean, in a way, he's my SE directly as a partner, and he's helping me close deals from a partner perspective, and that's helping my business get further ahead. And so that is, I think, what's really cool about where you are now, Aaron, is you have so, like you said, you have so much reach and you have so much ability to help so many different people now. I mean, it's like, you've got God power. It's amazing.
Certainly not, but but yeah, it is a lot more reach. And from how to make that change, that mindset change. That was one of the big things that kind of helped me flip that switch, right? It was, hey, you know, I'm going to have a larger impact. I can go out here and do a lot of good. I can do a lot of good for my customers, my partners. You know, like I said, 50% of my time is just helping customers. I'm also responsible for partner engagement too. So, you know, I have a lot of different responsibilities with training our partners on our newest solutions and helping them understand, you know, how they can help people and customers with those solutions as well. It's a pretty wide range of things that you have to be able to do with this job, and I think that's what keeps it challenging and exciting too. And every, you know, I'm only 6 months in, and all the time I uncover new things like that are things that aren't necessarily bullet points on a job description, but things that really help push the objectives forward of, you know, the vision of the job. You know, started an internal newsletter. My my manager has coined a nickname for me, Bolt Action, which is
Nice.
like my 10th nickname in my life.
That is awesome.
But
Bolt Action, Bolt House.
so I've got the Bolt Action newsletter that I put out internally to help with internal enablement, because, you know, VMware moves so fast in so many different places that it's really hard to keep up without your head spinning, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a logo of like a shotgun on there somewhere?
I don't have a gun. I figured that would be, something that might get flagged. Yeah. But I did make my own logo in my newsletter.
That's awesome.
And then I'm working on creating a newsletter for my customers as well to help keep them up to date on different things like CVEs that come out, and you know, product updates, and, you know, just providing those touch points, that white glove service that people expect from, you know, VMware.
Yes, white glove
service.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, this is something I have struggled with in dealing with big companies for a long time, and it's knowing when and how to properly engage an SE's services and what their limits of those people are. So, where in the trail of seeking a new solution does someone, or should someone, engage with a sales engineer?
So first of all, it's a solutions engineer.
Yes.
Dang it.
But, you know,
the acronyms.
I know, absolutely. We've got a whole website internally dedicated to acronyms. So if that means anything, but you know, I would say anytime you're thinking about the future of what you want to do with your infrastructure would be a good time to engage. Anytime you're you know, talking about what are we going to do to move our situation forward, and not necessarily when you've already concocted the idea and you've got, you know, it in your mind exactly what you need from a bill of materials perspective or anything like that. But even before that, when you're talking about what is the problem that our business has and how are we going to come about with a solution, that's a really good time to engage. But it's not the only time. I definitely take field questions from customers all the time. I am really engaged with customers that have questions about, you know, basic stuff like how do I upgrade vCenter, or how do I get from 5.5 to 6.5, because, you know, the 5.5 end of general support's coming up in September 19th. Any customers out there listening, make sure you get your upgrades done.
Call your friendly local partner.
Less than 2 weeks.
So, you know, those types of things are also really good to engage. I deal a little bit with SR escalations as well. We all know that regardless of what company you're calling, support can sometimes not be stellar. And so I'm definitely an advocate for my customers to our internal organization as well. But, you know, from a driving situation, right? You said, Tony, earlier that I no longer get my hands on the wheel and drive. I'm not covered by liability insurance for VMware, so I can't actually like
turn the knobs.
Yeah, I can't touch production environments. I will, provide guidance. I will provide, access to knowledge base articles. I'll happily whiteboard, conceptual things like how to migrate from a 5.5 rack to a 6.5 rack. If you're buying new hardware to replace stuff because you can't upgrade 5.5, for example, helped the customer with that last week. But anytime the rubber meets the road and you need somebody to actually step in and help, that's where professional services really gets involved. Or one of the big pushes that we have now is for the technical account managers, the TAMs or the TASs, the specialists.
But even they're not allowed to do stuff either, though, I thought.
They're not allowed to do stuff, but they can definitely get in and be more specific about, different things that customers need to do. But yeah, professional services does have liability insurance, so they can come in and they can actually do the work. But that's again a paid engagement. So if you have a local partner that you like that happens to do that type of work, definitely get to engage them as well. So that's kind of where the lines are drawn. It's a little hazy, but anytime hands need to get onto the steering wheel, I'm basically going to bow out.
And it seems like there's a little bit of overlap. I mean, aside from the fact that it's a paid service and you get a little bit more personal touch, it seems like there's an awful lot of overlap between a TAM and an SE role.
So it does. It does have a bit of an overlap. The difference is that a TAM is absolutely dedicated to your account in a way that is, and I mean, SEs are dedicated to your account, but a TAM is specifically dedicated to you to the point where they owe you deliverables, right? Okay. So you have this agreed upon statement of work, agreed upon deliverables that need to be provided. You've got cadence. Usually it's a weekly cadence, or if it's a tier 2 or a tier 3 or tier 4, you're talking about like every other week or monthly. And they provide a more specialized service that's well beyond what I can do as an SE or should do as an SE. And so there is a definite advantage to having a TAM. The SE, is a pre-sales role. So when you're talking about post-sales, that's where a TAM's really going to step up and help you. So you can talk to me. I'll help you architect the solution to help resolve the business issue. We get a BOM together, a PO signed, and then I can kind of do the handoff at that point. But at that point, that's going to be something that's post-sales. So a TAM's going to be better suited to handle any questions or, help the customer get from, having license keys and bits to actually deploying it and having a solution.
Right. Yeah. And kind of in our situation that we worked on over the past couple of weeks, I came to you late in the game. You had mentioned typically you engage an SE earlier in the game before you have an idea what your solution is going to be, before you hit a BOM. And, me being a vSAN guy, knowing more about it, I wanted to make sure, basically just kind of make those check boxes on the vSAN Ready Nodes program and make sure we were good to go because of some of the bad experiences we had in the past. So a little bit different experience, but I certainly appreciate your help making that good to go.
Yeah. And, that makes my job easy too when you already do the homework for me.
You would have been disappointed if I didn't.
I would have.
What kind of a vSAN expert would I be if I couldn't architect my own solution?
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Okay. We kind of touched on this a little bit, but this will be kind of the last company transition thing. So is this your first foray in a big giant multinational company?
No, I actually worked for IBM. Well,
that's right.
Technically, I worked for TechnoSource, I think is the name of the company. It was a smaller consulting firm, and I was a consultant to IBM, and I worked on a help desk for them. for about
But
9 months.
for those little guys like us who've never worked for a big giant multinational company, there's a shift there when you go from working for a small company or a small business of even 500 to 1,000 employees. That's still small compared to however many 20,000. I don't even know how many VMware employees there are now.
I have no idea.
It's a lot. That's all I know.
It's definitely a different change.
So what are kind of do you have any key things that you noticed right away, or is there some key things to look for people coming into this kind of situation? Because it seems like every other day I'm reading something on LinkedIn or on Twitter about somebody starting at VMware.
There is a bit of a hiring frenzy going on at VMware right now. I think I was on the beginning of that wave. One of the biggest differences is, previously we had 600 some odd employees at my previous job, and I'm not going to say I knew everyone, but I knew the majority of everyone. I would say I probably knew over 90% of the employees by first name, and had significant conversations with almost every.
Let's be honest, Aaron. That's just a lot of your personality. You know everyone. Everyone knows you.
Yeah.
But I meet a new colleague about every day, and being field and being remote and working from home is probably one of the biggest changes for me. I can't just get up from my cube or my office and walk down the hall and talk to,
Morning, Bill.
Whoever. Yeah, exactly. And it's a lot more of a self-discipline. I don't go into an office. I have to make sure that I am disciplined to get up and start my job and do my things and get to where I need to go. I don't have a boss that can watch me walk in and out of a room. I'm given that autonomy to do the things that I need to do and get them done. And it definitely takes a whole different mindset to do that compared to like going in and working a 8 to 5 at an office. So it's something you probably understand, Britton, having your own practice.
Well, yeah. I mean, except I'm not salaried, so if I don't show up and do stuff, I don't make any money.
Yeah.
So I have to do
if
stuff.
I didn't show up and do stuff, then I wouldn't make money for very long. I can tell you that.
Yeah, it catches up to you fast.
It
But
does.
no, I mean, you're right. It is totally like, even one of the projects I'm on now for a giant multinational global company. I mean, it's for me, it has been just a learning experience of sitting on a conference call with 30 other people and listening to these conversations happen and understanding roles and definitions and stay in your lane and you talk about your stuff only and don't get into somebody else's stuff. And I mean, it's a learning curve of just be focused on what you're there to do, because otherwise you end up literally causing problems for 15 other people.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. And, that kind of goes back to the part we were just talking about where, what is the SE's role, right? Because I need to make sure I stay within that role, because the sysadmin in me wants to fix people's problems. So when I, am talking to a customer and they're telling me all these problems that they're having, I'm like, oh, I could fix that, but I can't fix that. And I shouldn't fix that.
Or like, oh, that's an Active Directory problem, so you need to do this in Windows. And oh, wait a minute.
Exactly, because then I start telling them what they need to do and they do it and then they break it and then they say, well, Aaron from VMware told me to do that, and then I end up getting sued. So I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, and I actually made the transition the opposite direction. I think I came from a huge multinational global corporation of 120,000 employees, and it was very, very siloed, very departmental. You've got the server guys, you've got the storage guys, you've got the backup guys, you've got all these different segments across the country and across the world. And very similar to what Britton is saying, you've got everybody has their own little piece to play. You play your part in the symphony, as it were, and you don't step outside those bounds. So it's been a lot different transitioning back to a small company of about 1,000 people. to where, I am the decision maker, I'm the decision influencer, and I kind of do all the things. So I kind of the reverse of what you just went through, Aaron.
Yeah. And it's definitely a change, right? Not being able, like I said, not being able to walk down the hall and talk to, somebody that I'm working on a project with in order to do something. You've got to worry about schedules, and you've got to put things on calendars, and you end up on Zoom a lot more.
And change approval boards for me.
Right.
I
Exactly.
don't do those anymore.
Aaron, I know this may be too personal, so just tell me to go away if this bugs you. But you're a socially active guy. You like to talk to people. You're not one of these introverted IT guys, right?
Right.
So does that bug you that you don't have like regular coworker contacts?
Yes. Absolutely. Part of my day at my previous employer was walking around and seeing how people's day was, like having that regular social interaction. And at this point, I have a puppy that sleeps in a little bed next to me. And when my wife is home during the day, she's, doing her thing. And I try to make a bit of a physical separation. I've got my own office at home, and I close the door and I try to put myself in a mindset, because it helps me ensure that I'm,
would you say it's an NSX mindset? Watch the video later.
You might run into somebody that has that shirt on in your area or something.
Maybe a few. Yeah.
But it's definitely something that for me was difficult because I am so outgoing and social, and I require those types of interactions.
And for me, like that to me is one of the best parts of working for myself. Is I can hide from the world in my basement, and I don't have to talk to anybody. I can just do what I need to do and go upstairs and play with my kids, and then come back down and go on with my life. And now the kids are in school, so I find myself working out of my mobile car office quite a lot, which is still also enjoyable because I can sit in the quiet and just do what I need to do and not have to worry about interacting with other humans, except for a couple days a week when I go to a client's office. It's a beautiful thing when you're a super introverted guy like me.
You've opened up a lot, though.
Yeah, like it's like VMworld and going to big events like that. That is just draining on me. It kills me. It is so hard to be on and talking to people. I think it was Anthony Hook up from Heartland Systems up in Wausau, who he sent a tweet out before VMworld. He's like, deactivating introvert mode and activating VMworld mode. And I'm like, yes, I totally identify with that.
See, that's why I love going to VMworld, because I crave that every day.
Aaron and I are a lot alike.
I've never been that way.
Yeah. I feel you, bro.
The converse of that is that I get to go to a lot of customers. I get to talk to a lot of new people every week. Get to meet a whole lot of new people, and I have a tight knit team that I work with. I actually have 4 different account executives that I tie directly to in the territory, and so having a very tight relationship with them from a professional standpoint is pretty cool to me. Previously, I was managing people, so I was kind of leading, at my previous job, and now it's more of a cohesive teamwork atmosphere. So that's a different and nice change for me as well.
Cool.
How big is your territory?
I cover Illinois, Wisconsin, and Iowa.
Iowa, wow.
There's a lot of stuff going on in Iowa.
I know, I for some reason, whenever Iowa comes up, I never think about IT stuff. All I can think of is like corn, and apparently the birthplace of Captain James T. Kirk is somewhere in Iowa. Or is it Illinois?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's somewhere over there.
No, it's Iowa. It's Iowa. They got a lot of stuff going on out there. There's a lot of data centers that are popping up. I I don't know exactly what the crux of that whole situation is, other than the fact that it's a lot of financial, a lot of insurance, and maybe real estate's cheap. But you go to some of the campuses of these places out there, and they rival the stuff that's here in Palo Alto from like amenities and impressiveness standpoint.
It's pretty cool.
Nice. Okay, so let's jump to VMworld. Right, and you probably just did the same thing I did, Tony.
Yes, I did. I was going to segue us over.
Cool. So go ahead. I've been talking too much.
So can you kind of take us over some of the high-level overview stuff of VMworld announcements that were covered last week?
Sure. There was a lot covered. Is there anything specific you'd like me to touch on?
Yeah, so we have a few pre-selected topics. Can you touch a little bit on ESXi on ARM? It sounds like an intriguing topic. Something
Absolutely.
People have been calling for a while.
Yeah, so this was something that was talked about in the keynote, actually, and shown as a demo. But, one of the things that has limited a lot of people for choosing, different architectures to put out in the edge has been the fact that virtualization has been an x86 thing, right? For as long as it's been available in the VMware form. I'm not going to sit here and say VMware is the only virtualization platform out there. Virtualization's been a thing since the 70s on some different platforms. My old boss would tell you that IBM I is the only true virtualization, but we know that it's come a long way since then. But ESXi on ARM is really intriguing because it takes that capability of the consolidation and the ease of management, and it brings it down to devices that can really thrive on the edge. Stuff that doesn't need fans, stuff that is really low power, stuff that is purpose built and rock solid. And so the idea of being able to put ESXi on those types of devices really changes the game for a lot of these organizations that have the need to have a lot of those edges or those gateways in places that aren't as friendly to rack and stack x86 servers. So some of the things that they announced around that were pretty, I would say, banal from an overall excitement standpoint. It's vSphere, right? But it's vSphere on a platform that it hasn't been on before, which is where where that kicks in. And Pat himself came out and said this is not something that's going to replace Intel and AMD in the data center. He said himself that he doesn't see customers asking for that. Customers still want AMD and Intel in the in the data center, but they do have a desire to have this type of functionality at the edge. And so I think you'll see a lot of this really come up with the takeoff of IoT, the takeoff of the need for this type of management in those places that really don't have that functional capability today, where a lot of bare metal is, where a lot of those purpose-built expensive machines are. This is going to commoditize that. This is going to become a thing that allows you to manage that part of your infrastructure just like you would manage your data center today. And in effect, extending those people who have the capabilities of managing that data center infrastructure and extending their capabilities out to the edge as well. Instead of having to find somebody who's capable of understanding how to manage those workloads, you can take the knowledge that you already have and focus that in a new place.
So I have on screen this part of the presentation from VMworld Day 1 where she's talking about this thing on running on ARM, which they kind of snuck it into the presentation there at the end. It's
they did.
If you're looking on YouTube, it's like about an hour 25 or so into the show. And they're talking through, doing some cool stuff, and they're like, oh, by the way, this is all happening on ARM. And it was kind of just like, it almost lost a little bit of the bigness of the moment because they kind of slipped it in there. But
Right.
it really is like a kind of a transformational thing. Like I saw more activity online and people talking about this after they did this little spiel than almost anything else that got announced.
Right. I mean, it opens up the ability to virtualize workloads that today are stuck on bare metal, right? And when you do that, you change the game when it comes to management. And the ability to update a VM at the edge, where you can snapshot and go back if something goes wrong, and have all of these different capabilities that when you're talking about something on bare metal, you're talking about somebody's got to go down there and do it so that they can be there in case something goes wrong, or you click the firmware update from remote, and then you cross your fingers and pray and count the minutes. So it really does allow a total different shift in how those types of workloads are going to be managed.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about that is going to be the power savings. I think I'm not sure what a full ARM system is going to go for, but I have to imagine it's going to be cheaper than a full loaded out x86 server. So you're going to save money there. And being a home lab geek, I mean, I know there's tons of people in the home lab community that are excited about this too. I mean, I don't know what kind of hardware would be out there to run something like that off the top of my head, but I know the Raspberry Pi is out there. If they could get enough RAM stuffed into that guy, how awesome would that be to have like a 16 node Raspberry Pi cluster and it cost you like less than $200?
Right. Exactly.
I rewatched this announcement late last night, and during this exchange, when Pat comes back up on stage and he's just like, "What's the big deal about this?" and Ray O'Farrell up there with him says, "Oh, it's on this thing on ARM." He does caveat the announcement to say that it's a specific chipset that it will run on ARM. So it's not like all ARM chips.
No,
it's very very narrow at this point. So I don't see this happening on anything like a Pi anytime soon.
Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely specific at this point, but that's how VMware starts with everything that they do, right? Yep. They start specific, they perfect the different capabilities, and then they extend, and that's exactly how it happens. I mean, even if you look at something as simple as the hardware compatibility list for every time a new version of vSphere comes out, if you go day one to the hardware compatibility list, that list is pretty small. You go 6 months out and you go look at that same compatibility list. It got a lot bigger because people, from these OEM organizations take the time to figure out and test and understand which of these systems this stuff works on. And updates to the platform allow for extensions outside of the original scope as well. So, I can definitely see this being something that would have the capability to extend out to a much larger ARM capable chipset.
Yeah, maybe down the road, but that would be something that would be really interesting to keep an eye on.
Yeah, for sure.
Moving on, I know we've got a lot to cover here and we don't have a ton of time left, but there's going to be probably quite a bit to cover on this, but we're going to look at a little bit. Can you tell us about vSphere 6.7 U1 and the new Platinum tier?
Yeah, absolutely. So vSphere, let me start with vSphere Platinum because it's built on.
It's not a release, right? It's
not a release
or a license.
Yeah, it's a new SKU, right? It's like
Enterprise Plus and then Platinum, right?
Yeah, and App Defense included, right?
Right. So yeah, vSphere Platinum is Enterprise Plus and App Defense, but it's more than just that. It's actually also the addition of a plugin for vCenter that allows you to bring App Defense information into the vSphere web client. And so this allows you to see all of the information that you would normally want to see in your daily driving alongside of that App Defense information. So you don't have to have two tabs open. You don't have to go to two distinct portals, admin sites to administer these two tools. You can do it all together with vSphere Platinum.
So it's similar, like they're pulling some of the dashboarding from VROPS, for example, into vSphere to kind of make it a little easier, one place to go kind of thing.
Exactly. And, vSOM, vSphere with Operations Management, was a jump like above Enterprise Plus, this is going to be kind of the same thing. And so this is going to be that, but instead of intelligent operations, we're talking about application security. And so this SKU of that compute product line really does bring those two pieces together into a place that you can see them together. I'm not gonna say the buzzword. I'm sorry.
And for those that don't know what App Defense is, it's basically just a security model of secure by default.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senior Vice President.
Be able to communicate with each other and do what they need to do, and you have to manually allow everything.
It's whitelisting, right? So instead of the traditional. Yeah, instead of the traditional situation where you're trying to chase the bad guys and you're trying to use heuristics and all these different very legacy and painstaking efforts to try to keep the bad guys out. This is a situation where that SQL server is going to talk to that application server, is going to talk to that web server, and they're going to talk in these ways. And we're going to allow that traffic, and we're going to allow that that known good state to occur. And then when that database server starts talking to that Russian command and control server, obviously that traffic isn't something you want,
right?
And so we're going to take steps to stop that. And definitely one of the pieces that makes App Defense better is layering it on top of NSX, because it gives you some of that automation with the network layer that you don't normally get without the NSX piece. But even without NSX, App Defense can completely make you aware of anything that might be causing out of normal behavior inside of your data center.
Yeah, and that's a pretty new product, right? Because that was just announced at VMworld last year, 2017.
Yeah, and it's actually fairly inexpensive, especially for what it does. So if you are sitting there wondering, I can't afford that, I'd be willing to bet that if you talk to your VMware rep, you'd be surprised.
So I just wanted to plug these two VMworld sessions from Tom Korn and Tom Gillis on the NSX components and via the App Defense integration with NSX and vSphere. Both of these are really good. They kind of cover App Defense and how it works with things, and they do some really cool demos of how it actually happens as a product in there. So go check those out.
Excellent.
All right, Britt,
so as far as like what came out with vSphere 6.7 update 1, one of the biggest announcements I feel like from a customer perspective is, drum roll, the fully featured HTML5 vSphere client.
Yay! Full featured. Everything is there now.
100%.
All of the NSX components, because that was the last stuff I'm missing.
Yep. All the NSX components, all the VUM components, everything that didn't come in with vanilla 6.7 is there now. All the vSAN components, all the different pieces of the puzzle are there. And now you can completely use the HTML5 client. There's no reason to go back to the Flash client anymore. So, that is definitely one that gets a lot of cheers when I talk about it with customers.
And that is general availability, right?
So 6.7 U1 is currently, it was announced.
What are they looking at? November, I think, potentially for release?
I've heard sooner, but
okay.
They don't have a specific date yet, so I can't really pin down anything. But it will be sooner rather than later, and I'm pretty sure it'll be sooner than November.
Okay.
But a couple other cool things. When 6.7 vanilla came out, the whole idea of no longer needing an external PSC in order to have enhanced link mode between your vCenter servers. But there was this problem that it was only available with greenfield deployments. So you were talking about deploying a greenfield VCSA in both those locations, or all 3 or 4 locations that you were trying to do linked mode with. With 6.7 U1, they now have a converge tool that allows you to actually take the external PSCs, converge them into an embedded PSC onto a VCSA, and then that allows you to have that enhanced link mode without having an external PSC, which I know causes a lot of heartburn for some customers.
It's a huge pain.
Yeah, and it takes away a lot of the ease of updating. When you're talking about how the VCSA makes people's lives easier, external PSC takes a lot of that away. So this is a really cool step in the right direction. Yeah, you're right. It does defeat the process.
Because it could be done before, right? But it was a painful CLI process to do it.
Yeah, and I'd never heard anybody that was really successful with it.
Yeah, I heard some problems with that as well.
Another big update comes in with the HCI and vSAN. A lot of times people really want to talk about how vSAN can make their lives easier. And, up until this release, if you wanted to create a vSAN cluster, you were installing ESXi on a host and you were getting vCenter onto it, and then you were getting vSAN going, and then you were ingesting the other hosts, and then you were creating your disk groups, and you were doing all of your work, from the ground up. Now we've actually got a wizard that allows you to do all that, just like the ISO and the wizard for the VCSA allows you to deploy a VCSA into your environment through a local wizard on your Windows computer or your Mac. This now is capable of doing that for HCI deployments as well. So you can do a full vSAN HCI deployment from a wizard without having to do any of that, running around or any of those initial configurations with a vSAN only cluster.
Yeah, I think they call that quick start, right?
Yep, quick start. You got it. And then another piece with vSAN is now they've included firmware updates with the remediation step that normally came.
Huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
As somebody who's just gone through a huge firmware vSAN nightmare, that would have been handy to have for sure.
It would have been, and it's there now. So moving forward, once you're on 6.7 U1 tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah. You'll have that functionality and capability.
Test in production, right?
Yeah. Where else would you test? Another big one for me, because I cut my teeth on end user compute on Horizon. That's really where I got my start with VMware. From a production standpoint. vMotion for NVIDIA vGPU VMs. This has been like the holy grail of these types of workloads for a long time. Previously when you were setting up an NVIDIA, what used to be called NVIDIA Grid card, now it's like VDW or something. They changed the name of it again. I'll figure that out in a minute. But you were tying those VMs to a specific host. And then in order to do any maintenance on those hosts, you'd have to take those VMs down. You could then motion them off the host, and then you could do your typical maintenance that you would do for a vSphere host, right? Now, with 6.7 vanilla, they added in the ability to suspend and resume those, which gave you a little bit of a quicker back in and not so much of an outage window that you would need. But now with 6.7 U1, they've added full vMotion support. So you can now vMotion live those workloads. I do understand that there is like a blip that could be up to 5 seconds when those vMotions occur on those workloads as they're transitioning the vGPU from one card to another and syncing that back. But that is leagues better than anything there was before.
And we're looking at you, Sean Massey. People have been asking for that for a long time.
Indeed. And so those are some of the big hitters that came with U1. Another one is Enhanced Content Library. I don't know how many of your listeners are out there using Content Library. It's been one of those things that was this really cool sounding feature. Doesn't get a lot of use, and I know I used it in production at my previous employer because I had to sync things between the US and China, and in order to understand that I was deploying templates from recently updated templates. I wanted to make sure that I was syncing those across multiple vCenters. So enhancements to the content library are definitely welcome.
Yeah, and I've used content library in the lab. It's pretty interesting to get a hold of different ISOs and different things that you want to kind of store in there and make them centrally located.
It's definitely not a sexy feature. It's just talking about
I've
storing
never played
ISOs
with it at all.
Templates.
It's handy. It's definitely handy.
Interesting. So there was an NSX announcement apparently about NSX running natively on AWS, right?
Yeah.
I totally missed that. I don't know where I was when this happened, but I didn't hear about it until all of a sudden I saw it pop up. And yeah, I don't know if I was doing interviews that day or what, but tell me about this and what is this enabling?
So this is actually a pretty interesting update. They are continuing to push forward with all of these updates. This is M5 update for VMware Cloud and AWS. And each time they push out one of these big updates, there's all these cool new features and functionality that come along with it. In particular, advanced NSX capabilities. So previously to this, VMware Cloud and AWS, NSX was included in that, but it really was only allowing the back-end management to occur, and that was kind of a walled garden for the end user, the customer. In this, it actually brings a lot of those advanced NSX features to light to the customer for them to be able to use. The biggest one is a full integration with AWS Direct Connect. A lot of customers that are picking up VMware Cloud and AWS, their preferred method of connecting in is through an AWS Direct Connect. So this allows that connection of NSX to ride into that AWS Direct Connect. And another piece is microsegmentation. This was not available to customers previously for VMC and AWS, which was a shame because that was definitely one of the biggest selling points for a lot of people for NSX. So now being able to have microsegmentation really extends that role of NSX in a true form from your on-prem to your hybrid cloud environment. Now they've really cemented the ability for you to actually create those NSX rules on-prem, and then you could live vMotion that workload out into VMC and AWS, and it will keep all of that information for the security pieces of the NSX groupings.
It's the holy grail of cloud infrastructure from on-prem. It's that I'm discovering in projects that I'm working on is like the hardest hill to climb. Moving your security from on-prem to a cloud provider, no matter what you're doing, it's a manual effort today. And the key part of this, though, what you just said, you have to have it on the side A before you get to side B, and that's what still I'm waiting for a good solution on for companies who don't have NSX in production.
Yeah. You know so you can actually build the rules for the workloads that are moved out to VMC and AWS. It's just, what I was saying is that if you build the rules on-prem, they now migrate with the workloads directly. So you can actually build the microsegmentation out there in VMC and AWS. Same way you would on-prem. You can use the VM names, or you can use tags, and obviously that's going to follow that workload if you were to migrate and had NSX in both those locations.
Cool. All right, let's talk about this last piece, Project Dimension.
Now this is really cool.
Thank you.
I couldn't help myself.
10 seconds, Tony. 10 seconds. If you keep it under, it'll be all right.
Yeah, we're under 10 seconds.
Beastie Boys.
So Project Dimension is a really cool idea here, and it kind of builds off of some of the interesting things that VMware is doing in the managed services space. So we were just talking about VMC and AWS. That is a managed service, right? You don't have to worry as a customer about updating the hosts, about managing any of the back-end pieces like the vCenter, the NSX deployment, the vSAN pieces. All that's handled for you as a part of the contract that you have for having a VMC and AWS connection. And the same with VKE, which is VMware's Kubernetes managed service. This is that, but for your robo. Okay. This is something that you can actually buy right now. There is a deal with Dell and Lenovo. You can't buy it right now, but you will be able to buy it. And the idea here is that you purchase some hardware that's going to come with the full SDDC, right? Lifecycle management all the way down to vSphere, vSAN, NSX.
So kind of similar to Cloud Foundation in a way here?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. But the difference comes in the fact that this is a managed service, right? This is going to be something you can buy and is going to go out to that robo that you have, if it's down the street or across the country, or if you have global entitlements, maybe you ship this off to Mexico or
remote
Europe
office branch office for those who don't know the acronym.
Sorry. Yeah, absolutely.
Robo.
I'll write it on my whiteboard. And so this is actually something that gets plugged in and calls back out to a VMC and AWS instance, and then auto configures and deploys from that cloud instance. So this is going to be something that is just going to be turnkey. It's going to show up. It gets plugged into the internet, and it spins itself up and goes. It's also going to be managed by VMware engineers as well. So,
updates and everything, patching, it's all done by them, hands off. Okay.
Correct. Absolutely. Just all you have to worry about is the workload. You don't have to worry about any of the nuts and bolts going on underneath the covers. And if there is a situation where, hardware vendor has to be called out, this would be a situation where the proactive pieces that come along with some of the things like Project Skyline, which I notice you have a shirt of, come into play as well, where you've got this all this metric data going back to VMware, and people are going to be maintaining and monitoring that. And then if they detect an issue, they're going to be creating a ticket and informing you and letting you know. And if something has to happen from a hardware perspective, they'll even dispatch a hardware service technician to the location for you.
Nice.
So you don't have to actually get in a car at 3 a.m. on a Saturday and drive down to Indiana and try to fix something that went wrong in a particular data center robo down there that you have. Maybe
that hurts, man. It hurts. I got 2 sites in Indiana now. Thanks for that.
So the idea behind this is the reduction of operation complexity and costs, right? So you as an IT person don't have to go down there and do this stuff. It's going to be turnkey. You order it, it gets shipped, it gets plugged in, and it's done. Operational consistency is another big piece as well, because all the management, the updates, those things, it's all going to stay in lockstep with the different pieces that you would have running in the cloud. Because of the capabilities that are coming in with all of these different AWS services that are being offloaded to capabilities within vSphere, like AWS RDS support or Greengrass, those applications and services will also run on Project Dimension as well. So it really turns edge computing on its head as well, and gives you that capability of really having a turnkey solution that you can pretty much be hands off with from a management perspective.
Yeah, it sounds very familiar in terms of the way you're explaining it to Cloud Foundation and how all of that automation is building out your environment, the SDDC. I would have to imagine that some of that code is shared or modified for those types of deployments.
It definitely is a big part of it, right? And that's one of these things where they're not reinventing the wheel on this. It's an iteration of different projects that have already been in place, and so you get to a point where this thing can deploy itself and be managed outside of your typical day-to-day management, and then you don't have to worry about these tiny little branch offices that just need to run. They just need to work, and you're more worried about how do you move the business forward and how do you engage in those things that are actually going to help you not just put out fires and keep the lights on.
Yeah, I appreciate a lot of those aspects, and I like where VMware's trying to go with some of their product strategies on that. As an administrator, I can focus on big picture things and not focus on, like you said, putting out fires as much. The only problem is for people like Britton and I, small businesses, what's the price tag on something like that going to end up being?
And I haven't seen that. I don't know. I can't imagine that it'll be cheaper than rolling your own because it is a managed service, right? A managed service is never going to be cheaper from a pure cost standpoint, but it may be cheaper if you take into consideration that you're not going to have to send somebody over there, or if you take into consideration that if that thing does go down and you have to send somebody there, you have to wait for them to get there, and you have to wait for them to diagnose the problem, and you have to wait for them to fix it. So from that perspective, you're talking about potentially a lot of cost savings.
Well, even from
there's
$1
definitely business value there.
From $1 perspective, VMC on AWS, which that acronym bugs me for some reason. I don't know why.
It's too long.
Well, it's just VMC. It makes it sound like something else other than what it is. I don't know. But VMware Cloud on AWS, there was a huge cost cut on that. I heard something, it was like 40 or 50%.
Yeah, 50% cost reduction on initial workloads.
Yeah, and you can try out the single host for 30 days for free.
Yeah,
nice. Yeah.
So they're starting to really do some serious, investment in that, especially with them talking about adding availability zones in across the whole globe here by next year sometime.
I think they're already in all availability zones, aren't they?
Not yet, but they're getting there.
Yeah, it's almost there. They're basically they pre-announced the announcement of them doing it globally.
That's what I caught.
Yeah, and we're getting more people onto the platform, and anytime you get some saturation in the market, the market will bend back, right? So prices are coming down, operational costs are getting spread out more. There's a lot of different reasons why the costs on that are going down. Every time something's new, it's always expensive, right?
Yeah. Well, and I'm hoping that it comes down enough that they even start maybe like a disaster recovery tier that's cheaper yet, because we've experienced here in Dane County, Wisconsin in the last month, major disasters. We've had more rain in the last month than we've had in hundreds of years. And whole parts of the city of Middleton were underwater for a week or more. A friend of mine at the UW hospital, they lost an entire floor of one of the UW hospital offices, including a data center. Anytime there's a foot of water in the data center, it's not a great thing.
Yeah.
I have been there, but
yeah, I mean, it's it's even bringing up conversations with my customers of, what do I do in this kind of scenario? Because they're seeing all their neighbors go through these problems and all of a sudden they don't have a failback. And so now it's just wait a minute, we need something running that's not, in our state. We need it running somewhere else so that when something happens, because these things happen, we're realizing you got to have a backup plan. And this is sort of on the heels of another major thing. Just a month or so ago, there was a massive gas explosion in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, where it blew up a whole city block. And I mean, there was whole businesses shut down for weeks from that, and just on that street, and couldn't do anything because a lot of those are restaurants and that kind of stuff, which they're just you can't put that in the cloud, but
Right.
but still,
Grubhub would like to.
yeah, but it just still kind of brings to the point of, if you don't plan for these things, they're gonna happen, and you're gonna be left holding the bag with, who knows what.
And I definitely think that they're working on getting there. Before VMworld, VMC and AWS was minimum 4 nodes, and your nodes were this big, right? And
it was like $250,000 a year.
Yeah. If you had loyalty discounts and stuff like that, it got to about $200K a year. But now they're talking about the single node pilots. They're talking about 2 node capabilities, 3 node capabilities, 4 node capabilities. But not only are they talking about different levels of node capabilities, they're also talking about different sizing of those nodes, right? So we're no longer talking about one size fits all nodes. It's probably one of the biggest barriers to entry for the customers that I would talk about VMC and AWS with, is they would either say, well, that's not enough, or that's too much. And nobody ever said, that's perfect. And that's exactly what I would have sized it for myself. So, the ability to make that different, I think will really help the solution fit more customers rather than just trying
that initial node size that they came out with. That initial node size they came out with, like, I could probably run 3/4 of my customers just on one node.
Yeah. I mean, 36 cores, 512 gig of RAM,
ridiculous,
10.7 terabytes of of space. It's huge.
One other thing that I think is really interesting and a really good selling point of VMware Cloud on AWS is the fact that if you have any kind of predictive failure, you're about to lose a disk group or an individual disk device in vSAN, or you're about to lose a host, it can detect that, and it can automatically provision another server, spin it up, bring it up into your SDDC, and decom the old one, evacuate your data, and you're up and running. You never even knew anything happened. That's powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to worry about hardware failures at all at that point anymore, because they can automatically spin something else up for you. That's really powerful.
Yeah, that and to extend onto that, elastic DRS, the ability to put guardrails on your bursting capabilities, right? So you have this capability of, well, if I run out of capacity in VMC and AWS, I want to be able to spin up a node. And when I come back below that threshold, I want to be able to spin it back down.
Yeah, like seasonal workloads.
Exactly. For those retail that have that, or maybe you're a Grubhub or any of these other newer types of services like Uber for food or whatever, where you've got these situations where people are going to be putting more demand on your workload than you had planned capacity for, right? And if you're doing that on-prem, you're talking about lead times. You're talking about having to figure out what you're going to shut down to run those workloads. And, you end up in a situation where you can't really meet that demand. Well, in this case, you could, and you could have that new capability in minutes.
Yeah, and the flexibility to drop back down when your workload drops back versus, the physical realm. You just bought all this expansion of hardware into your data center that you're now stuck with powering, and you might not need it all the time. There's things like DPM and physically powering things off, but it's not as easy to do, and you've got that investment in there.
Exactly.
Guys, we're starting to hit time here, so any last nuggets you'd like to share with us, Aaron and Tony?
Well, I just am happy to be on, guys. I appreciate you guys thinking I'm important enough to actually talk about things.
Oh, dude.
No, dude, we wanted you on for a while. You've always been a good friend of Britton and I, and you have a lot of knowledge. And now that you've transitioned over to VMware, we've got a lot more stuff to talk about. So we really enjoyed having you on. Good information.
Yeah. Anytime, guys.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up. And I'm trying to think if there was anything else that I needed to talk to you about, Aaron, but now I don't know.
I'm sure you'll think of it.
I probably will as soon as we're done.
As soon as we stop the recording.
Yeah. It happens every time. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Aaron, this has been a lot of fun. We will definitely have you back.
Yeah.
Especially once we get to April UserCon time, we'll have to pre-announce some stuff that we're going to talk about at UserCon, because I think that's that's a big time around here.
We're working on some exciting sessions. As Aaron knows, it's the 10th anniversary of Wisconsin VMUG UserCon next year, so we're working on some exciting things. We're starting the planning for that event. We've already got a venue locked down, and we're going to continue to work on bringing some good speakers in, and it'll be fun.
I just thought of it.
Nice.
Aaron, you and I had talked about trying to do some stuff later in the fall/winter together. So, we're either going to try to do some sort of a webinar on NSX deployments or some other type of thing, with the hope of an eventual VMworld presentation collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't get to go to VMworld this year. It was the first year in 8 years that I did not get to go. And that was because low man on the totem pole here. But I'm going to make it a point to ensure that I'm out there next year. And definitely one avenue is to get a session, right? So we're going to make a session happen.
We'll do it.
That'd be awesome.
All right. Thanks, guys. I'm going to play us out, and we'll go from there. Everybody, thanks for joining us. Have a great week.
Thanks, guys.
Again, this has been Gigacast episode 21 for Sunday, September 9th, 2018. Thanks again to Aaron Bolthouse. He is on Twitter at bhouse563. Britton Johnson at VCIXNV. Tony is at Import Car Guy. Thanks again, Aaron, for joining us. We don't have a scheduled guest on the schedule yet for October, but we're working on that. We'll get that coming to you. A couple quick things. You can leave a review for the show on whatever platform you listen to us on. That would be helpful. And also, we have a couple new URLs. You can go to show.gigacast.net for the YouTube channel, and you can go to feed.gigacast.net if you want to add the MP3 audio feed to your favorite player of choice. Thanks again for listening. We will catch you guys all later.